What's up, y'all? That is a great old tune called the Lark in the Morning. 4-part jig, and it's one that, at least in my session area around here, tends to kick off a session a lot. It's a good warm-up tune, good tune to get your fingers and your brain working properly, and there's lots of stuff to work on here, lots of stuff to throw in, lots of stuff to trial and error out, see what works and that sort of thing, so let's break it down. Of course, before we go through all that trial and error stuff, we're going to work on the basic melody, starting, as you might expect with the A part here. We'll get that nice and slow. Here we go. And of course, that whole thing would repeat, and we carry on with the B part. Now, I'm not going to break down individual chunks on this one just because it's, again, a 4-part tune. So that would take a while. But hopefully you're able to get that first bit. If not, go back, run through that, make sure you get that all locked down before we carry on with the B part. It does jump up into the second octave, pretty well into the second octave, so mind your hearing and that of those around you. But here we go. Again, nice and slow. Hopefully you're kind of picking up a theme that these parts tend to end on that B. They just sort of land on there. That's sort of the theme of this tune, and one you can kind of copy and paste as you go from part to part. The C part, the third part here, operates in a very, very narrow range, which is one of those things that I kind of look forward to in a tune, because that means you've got opportunities for ornamentation and things that you kind of need to make it a little bit more varied. But again, basic melody here, nice and slow. Again, very narrow range, kind of operates between that D and F sharp a lot in that part. The fourth part, the D part, is kind of an inversion of that, still a sort of a narrow range there, but interesting take on it, which I think is kind of cool. So here we go, still nice and easy, nice slow tempo here. Here we go. Again, reusing that same kind of ending phrase that we've had throughout this. So hopefully you got that. I'm going to take a good whole run through at it, each part once through, all together, kind of linked up. So again, ordinarily you'd play A, B, B, C, C, D, D, but otherwise this would be like a really long video. So we'll just play each part once through, still nice and mellow tempo. 2, 3, 4. back around. And again, of course, we'd be running each of those parts twice, but hopefully that gives you something you can at least practice against and make sure that you're getting the most of those notes in line. I tend to vary it up a little bit, so it's probably not exactly the same, but hopefully they give you some decent starting point. If you've been with me for a while, you've probably started to pick up some of those possibilities or options for where you might throw in a roll or a cut or something like that at that slow tempo. Hopefully your fingers are starting to take a run at it and see what works. Here's a couple things that I would do. Rolls are probably the name of the game in this tune. That's my most common one, I would say. And I think they just fit pretty well. But so starting with the A part here. Anytime you've got those good long held notes, possible roll option. Right, good spot for those. You can do both on the A and on the B. And I'll usually throw in a cut in between those to give the following note a little bit of its own weight, because otherwise it kind of gets overshadowed. So, carrying on then. Again, good opportunity for a roll there because it's still the same held note. Now I do like throwing in that triplet. That's the other default ornament, I would say. I'll use that whenever I get the chance. And a bit of a refresher on how that's done. Starting in A, B, go to C natural, despite the fact that this is in D, doesn't really matter because you're hitting it so quickly. And as you do that, you're going from B to G accidentally. You're kind of bouncing off that, and it gives that extra little blip sound, right? So when you do it quickly, come off that, go quickly to the second octave D, it's got a really nice rhythmic effect. So, and then when I finish the triplet, or the triplet there, I'll come to an F sharp, which to this point is the highest note in the phrase, a concept I've abused a lot. And when I get there, I like to accent that. In this case, it's just a nice simple cut. Could do a slide would work, but something to give it a little bit of momentum there. Maybe slide into the B as you come back down. Then you get a new highest note in the phrase. And that's one of those things that I like to, I sort of envision a meter on an audio device where you got the peaks and you hit that point and now here's that line that says this is your highest point. And you hit again and it moves it up a little bit, then it falls back down. So anytime I get to those new points, I want to announce that. And in this case, I want to announce it slightly differently. So the first one, we might do a cut. Might cut that F sharp, and then when I come around to it the second time on the A, I might slide. For a couple of reasons. One, it's different, and it gives it some other distinguishing characteristic versus the previous high point in the phrase. And sliding into that high A is a little easier to hit. When I finish that phrase, I'm always doing just a little tap there. I like the sound of the tap on the B. The combination there just always works well. It's subtle and it's just kind of crisp, I think. Then we're back into the B part and we're back into that same slide again on the A for the same reason. I really want it to be nice and clean, and it gives a bit of a confidence boost. Then we're sliding all the way up to the B, and again we're pushing that envelope. We're raising the highest note in the phrase. Now we've got a new peak. So I'm trying to give it a little bit of its own boost, and the slide is a nice safe option there. Could really cut it, particularly if you preceded that cut with a tonguing stop. Nice thing about that is if you do a cut on that high B, that's sort of the strongest, the most punchy thing you can really get out of this for most cases. You can then follow that up with a series of slides, which are a bit more mellow. So it kind of softens that high edge. Think about it in terms of that and see if that gets you anywhere. That's sort of how I would tend to end that phrase. That sort of descending line rolls work really well, like kind of falling down the stairs. I do go into a lot more detail on this part in particular. Well, really the whole tune on Patreon. If you want to go through the deep dive series with me, we break down much more excruciating minutia with this tune because there's lots to cover, lots of options that you can do. So link is down below on that. Feel free to jump on board if you're digging it. In the meantime, the C part here, let's jump in there because there's lots you can do with that too in this very narrow range, right? So that's one thing I like to do, sort of making it marchy, I guess. Almost like I imagine a snare drum hitting those strong beats. Can kind of pair that with a bit of tonguing to give it some distinct separation in those notes too. I think that gives it that very cool, again, snare drum kind of approach. And when I come back to it, I do like to throw in a cran there on the repeat, if I can get it. Not necessary, I would say, but it's kind of cool. That's another one where if I'm doing the rolls the first time in the B part, I'm probably going to do it again in the C part to mirror that. I like to copy and paste that phrase if I can. You can really pair slides with tonguing to give it that separation, so you're kind of mixing staccato and legato real well on that phrase. It's fairly repetitive, so I like to give it some interesting rhythmic punch when I can. That's one cool way to do it. You can certainly do cuts and stuff too. Very, very punchy, you know, so I sort of like to balance that, and maybe one time through I would do it very punchy. The other time I might do it very mellow and give it a little bit of dynamic range in that, because that's why it's such a great warm-up tune, I think, is it kind of covers a lot of the basics. It's got some arpeggios in there, it's got some rolls in there, it's got some of those octave jumps. It sort of gives everybody the chance to fine-tune their brain a little bit. So hopefully this one gives you some options to mess with. There's loads more. Lots of things to do, and I would encourage you to do a lot of trial and error with this. This is sort of like a sandbox tune, at least when you're playing by yourself. I would say it gives you some chances to try it and see what works, and you know, let me know what y'all think of this one, and if you've got any other cool ornaments that you throw in there that maybe you want me to talk about, let me know. Otherwise, guys, I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.